Hi, everybody. Happy Labor Day. It is the last day of summer for almost everybody. And since this week, a whole lot of people are going back to school, we are going to have our theme of books for the week be all about school. So I have a bunch of different school books. I'm going to read one every night and share it with you. We've got The Class from the Black Lagoon. We have David Goes to School. We have The Berenstain Bears Go to School. We have this one. It's not about school, but it's about reading, and reading's a really important part of school. This is Red Knit Cap Girl and the Reading Tree. And for today's, we have Ruby Bridges Goes to School. And if you don't know who Ruby Bridges is, you definitely should. You'll learn more about her in this, but a lot of times we take for granted that in schools we will have kids that have white skin and black skin and brown skin and kids all over the world who all get to learn in school together. Not even that long ago that wasn't a possibility. When we read this book, you might feel like Ruby Bridges, like, oh, this happened hundreds of years ago. No, she's still alive and she's not very, very old. So it's important to know that not even that long ago, children who looked different from one another didn't get to be in the same school together. And Ruby Bridges was a very brave little girl who started and was one of those people that kind of persisted, and she and her family and a lot of other people stood up for what was right and said, it's not okay that we have to go to a different school than white children. So this story is called Ruby Bridges Goes to School, and the really cool thing is that Ruby Bridges herself actually wrote this. So it's her words, her story. It's not somebody else telling her story, it's her telling her story. So here we go. And it's a little bit longer than some of the other books, but I think it's worth it. It says, a long time ago, some people thought that black people and white people should not be friends. In some places, black people were not allowed to live in the same neighborhoods as white people. And I'm going to show you some posters. This one says, we want white tenants in our white community. Wow, that is not a very welcoming thing to see. Even if, I'm a white person and I would never want to live in a community where that was the sign that was up. Or this one, we won't go to school with Negroes. Negro is a word that we don't use, white people don't use anymore. And it's a really derogatory, it's a really hurtful word to use to describe black people. In some places, black people were not even allowed to eat in the same restaurants as white people. And you can see this restaurant has a sign that says whites only. And this one has one that says for colored. So sometimes they wouldn't call people black people or African American, they would just call them colored. And in some places, it's actually in a lot of places, black children and white children could not go to the same schools. When black people and white people weren't allowed to be in the same places together, that is called segregation. You can see a school with only black children and a school with only white children here in these pictures. And just because the pictures are all black and white, again, you might think it happened a long, long time ago. This isn't a really long time ago. It's not even... This happened in the 60s, in the 1960s. So you guys weren't born yet, but some of your parents might have been born, your grandparents were born. This wasn't hundreds of years ago. The people from the United States government said segregation is wrong. People should live where they want. People should eat where they want. Children should go to school where they want. My name is Ruby Bridges. In 1960, I went to kindergarten in a school only for black children. I liked my school. I liked my teachers. I liked my friends. And Ruby Bridges is just about the cutest little girl in the world. But there was a school for white children even closer to my house than the school for black children. It was the William Frantz Elementary School. The government said Ruby Bridges should be allowed to go to the William Frantz School. And again, this is a story for kids. This is a really simplified version of this story. There's plays about Ruby Bridges. There's lots of books about her. There's YouTube videos. You can learn a lot about her, and I recommend that you do. In 1961, I was in first grade. My mother took me to the Frantz School. Marshals came with us. Those are almost like security officers to make sure that we were safe. So look at this little tiny girl. She had to get walked to school by big, strong people to make sure she was safe. Some people did not want a black child to go to the white school. They stood near the school and yelled at me to go away. So these are teenagers and adults yelling at a 7-year-old because they were frightened of her going to a school. That doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. Parents took their children out of the school. I was all alone with my teacher, Mrs. Henry. So this little girl, even though she went to a school where white kids could go to, none of the white parents would let her be in their class. So she was in the school, but she had to do first grade all by herself, just her and her teacher. I loved Mrs. Henry, and Mrs. Henry loved me. In case you didn't know, teachers are basically superheroes. I was a very good student. I learned math. I learned how to read. But I wish the children would come back. And here's Mrs. Henry, the superhero. Months and months passed. Then one day, children began to come back to school. At last, I had friends to play with. I was very, very happy. I guarantee you, at the time when the kids didn't get to go to school, they wouldn't have been frightened or not wanted to play with Ruby Bridges. Because a lot of times kids are more open-minded, and sometimes it's the adults that need to take a little bit longer to understand why we don't need to be scared of things that are different. Many people have read about me in newspapers and books. A famous writer, John Steinbeck, wrote about me. He wrote that I was very brave. A first lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote a letter to me. The letter told me I was a good American. Norman Rockwell was an artist who painted a picture of me. That painting has become very famous. Now I am grown up. I am married. I have children. One day, Mrs. Henry and I were both asked to be on a TV show. That was the first time we had seen each other in many years. Now we talk to each other often. Now black children and white children can go to the same schools. I like to visit schools. I tell my story to children. I tell children that black people and white people can be friends. Not just can, should. And most important, I tell children to be kind to each other. This is wise, wise words from a little girl that really ended up helping change the world. So I know that a lot of you are probably starting school, maybe sitting in front of a computer, but that doesn't mean that we can't be kind and welcoming to new kids that we see on the screen or new kids in our class. And if you're in person and there's new kids in your school, this is a weird time to have to meet kids. You can't really give high fives or hugs. You have to smile behind your face mask, but just make sure there's never a wrong time to be kind and be welcoming to new kids that you meet, especially if they don't look the same as you. All the more reason to be kind and welcoming. There's nothing about looking different that means a person is somebody to be frightened of or exclude. So I hope that you have a great day. I hope you have a great first day of school tomorrow, if tomorrow is your first day. And I will see you the rest of the week for some more Night Times with Nina. Good night.